The year was 2010, and little did we know how much our life was getting ready to change. At the time, we lived in a 2,600 square foot house in the city.
And I worked as a massage therapist and was pregnant with our first baby.
And I was heavily in my career as a personal trainer and nutritional coach. For years, I lived at the gym. I loved it. I was very passionate about health and fitness. I competed as a natural bodybuilder for a number of years, even earning my pro card.
Welcome number 59, Mike Dixon. Mike.
But it was starting to get to the point where I didn't like being at the gym anymore. It was getting to the point where I was feeling unfulfilled and actually hated to be there despite having great clients and great people to work with. And that same year, I was like, I want to have a garden. I've never had a garden before. I grew up as a suburban kid, never grew anything, but I was like, we have a baby on the way, we have our first house together, so I want to grow something. I want to have a garden.
And my childhood looked a little different than Mike's. I was, out in the country running around barefoot all the time. But also, I lived beside my grandparents, and my grandfather always had this big garden. We'd have squash and green beans and okra, but we also had fig trees and a pear tree and persimmons and blueberries. So, having food right there was really common. And but we also had our fair share of processed foods, sodas, chips, Doritos, moon pies, Little Debbie cakes. We still had all that stuff. But looking back on how we used to eat, I can see how marketing changed the way we ate through the years. I mean, we also had margarine too, which, people had been convinced that margarine was better than butter, which is totally not true. But so even though I learned how to cook from scratch from my mom and my grandparents, we still had those convenience foods, frozen lasagna, frozen dinners, because they were supposed to make our lives so much better. But, all the additives and stuff, it doesn't make you better. It just actually makes your health worse. And all through school, I had been the fat kid. I was the fat kid. And when I graduated high school, I worked at a summer camp. And that summer, everything kind of changed. If you wanted soda, you had to buy it for yourself. And I didn't want to spend my money. So I didn't drink soda that whole summer. And in 1 month of not drinking soda and being more active because we walked everywhere, I lost 10 pounds. And it was like a light switch kind of went off. And I think I had new food and everything with weight and health. But it was just, that happened to me. So it just switched. And from then on, I started reading health magazines and fitness and learning what I needed to do. And so I started working out. I started running. I got to where I was running 10 to 15 miles a week. I was actually lifting weights too, as well as swimming. So maybe I overdid it, but I had a goal for the next summer. I wanted to wear a bikini. And I was hitting it hard so I could make that goal happen. And I did. And from there on out, health and fitness really became a big part of my life.
And sometime after that, we met. And fitness and nutrition was one of a number of things that we had in common. And we're both were on that goal of trying to better ourselves, of eating better and working out. And we went from eating natural foods to organic foods and getting rid of processed foods, eating and drinking less sugar. And we were just feeling better. And I still remember growing up only being able to breathe out of one nostril, not being able to breathe out of both at the same time. And as I was eating better, I started being able to breathe out of both nostrils, and I was like, whoa, Lacie, is it normal to only be able to breathe out of one?
And I'm like, no, it's totally not normal. Like, how could you have your whole childhood thinking that it's normal to only breathe out of one side of your nose?
So yeah, that just shows how much food can affect the way that we're feeling. It just felt good to be able to start changing that. And then as we start eating organic food, and then we get to this point where we're at the garden that we were just talking about, we're having our first garden. So I was like, the best way to know that you're eating the best food possible is actually to grow it yourself and to know the story behind what you're eating. And then we started growing things, and it felt so rewarding, and it was so much enjoyment to be able to harvest and reap the fruits of our labor. And in our front yard, we were having things, instead of having the holly bushes and the nandinas, we had tomatoes growing, we had squash and eggplant growing, we had lettuces growing, and we had corn growing in the front yard. We were the only weirdos in our neighborhood. You could easily pick out our house because we had rain barrels and tomatoes and squash growing in our front yard.
And in the summer of 2010, Selah was born, and it changed the whole dynamic of our family.
It sure did. I'd never anticipated how much having a child would change my whole perspective on life. It was amazing. It really was amazing. So then fast forward a little bit, the following year, Selah was out there getting dirty right from the beginning. She was out there in the garden with me. I walked her around as we were doing different things in the garden with my ergo carrier on, and like, come on, and we were just spending time growing, and we were growing even more than we did the previous year. And it was just so neat to be able to share those moments, because I wanted our children to have a different lifestyle than I had growing up. I wanted them to have that connection early on with their food. And then fast forward a little bit more, not too long after that, our second child, Josiah, was born.
And as we grew our family, we kept growing our garden too. Every year it seemed to get bigger and bigger. And thinking back about this, it's really cool that our children, all they know is us growing stuff. I mean, we went to the grocery store too, but at every point in their life, we have grown food and eaten food out of our garden. And that's so foreign to a lot of kids now. It's just so neat to know that our kids know where their food comes from. And at this point in our family life, I was making like everything from scratch. Pretty much any sauce we ate. I was making our mayonnaise, our bread, our tortillas, our pizza dough, all of these things I made from scratch myself at home. And the more we kept doing that and the more we produced, the more we wanted to produce for ourselves. So we had, a new goal line ahead of us.
And with all of this that's happening, and that 2010 being the catalyst or the changing moment, my whole outlook on life just changed. And seeing that it's just not about me, life's just not about me, and get. It's really about producing and giving and sharing and feeling good about that. So as we're at this moment, I'm like, alrighty, I'm addicted to growing and producing and doing all the things that we're doing. I'm devouring all these homesteading magazines and podcasts. I'm like, I just want to keep learning. I want to do more. I want to do more. I want to do more. And it got to the point where it's like, all right, the next thing on the list is chickens. I want to raise chickens so we can start having our own eggs. So I was so pumped up, ready to do it, until I found out the city ordinances would not allow it, and people had been trying to get it changed, but it wasn't changing. And we knew we had some neighbors that probably wouldn't be happy if we had chickens. So it was like, with that and a number of other things of what was happening, what we were doing, it's like, I really feel like we need to move beyond our house and our property here in this city, that our homesteading and family goals have outgrown where we are, and not being able to have the chickens, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And we're like, all right, we just want to just sell everything and move out to the country. But there was just a little bit problem. That problem was we didn't necessarily have the budget to do it. So we're like, what do we do? So we ended up just selling everything we had, including second car that we have, and Lacie even sold her wedding band to pursue this goal. And with that, we found a used yurt on Craigslist. And tell them a little bit about that part, because that's pretty interesting.
Well, I had joked for a few years because in Mother Earth News there was always an advertisement for yurts in there, and I was like, why don't we just buy a yurt? And you know, nothing ever really serious, but we were both on the same page about really wanting to move out to the country. And he's at work one day and I'm online, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna look on Craigslist for a yurt, just because. So I type it in, and what do you know, one pulls up that's like 2 hours away from us. And so I call him at work. So he's at work. I was so excited about this, and I was like, okay, what do you think about this? I was like, what if we buy a yurt and we tear my grandparents' old house down and put a yurt down there where they used to live? And he's like, I'm not saying no, but ask your dad. So my next phone call was to my dad, and I was like, hey Dad, what do you think about us ripping Nana and Pop's old house down and putting a yurt up down there? And he was like, okay, because there was already a septic tank and a well, and I knew those would be really expensive. So that is kind of where it started.
And with selling our house in the city and the number of all the other things that we sold, we were able to buy the yurt, we were able to get a used farm truck, and then we got to work. But before we could set up the yurt, I first had to demo Lacey's grandparents' old house.
And I know some of you guys may be wondering, well, why didn't you just live in the old house? Well, it was an old single wide trailer with a masonry addition, but it was so old and the roof leaked and it was full of mold and totally uninhabitable. Yeah. So we had to tear it all down.
And tearing it all down, that was actually kind of fun. Using an excavator to tear it down and using a sledgehammer at times, that was kind of fun. But the cleanup, oh boy, that took a little bit of time. It was like dumpster after dumpster full of just materials. Whew, thankfully your dad was helping out with that project, but it was pretty lengthy. Then after we got everything cleared up, we dug the holes for the footing and poured our footing. Then we built concrete pillars for the yurt to sit on. After the pillars, we did the flooring and the lattice, and it was so neat at this point. You're like, it's starting to feel good. It's starting to come together, because it was taking a little bit longer than we thought that it was going to be, setting up our yurt, having to go hurdle over hurdle to get through it, and the building inspectors not really knowing what they're dealing with here and trying to work through it, and we didn't realize our county was going to be as strict as they were. So that was an interesting time. We're trying to get through that stuff.
Jumping through hoops, it was just not fun. And even though things were coming together, it was a super stressful time for us, because things did not happen overnight. It was actually a 2-year window from the time that we both decided that we wanted something different for our family to the time we actually got to move into the yurt and live here.
But thankfully, we did have a little bit of help along the way with setting the yurt up. Our friends TJ and Andrew helped us with setting up the exterior of the yurt, as well as their electricians, so they really did us a favor and were a blessing to helping us get electricity here inside, because that was one of the goals that we had. We wanted to not be too primitive in here, even though we were on a kite string budget. We wanted to have real walls. We wanted to have a bathroom, a laundry area, our own bedroom, things like that in here, just to make it even more comfortable for us.
Although it was an adjustment moving from 2,600 square feet to 700 square feet, we spent a lot of time, planning the layout for this yurt to make sure it would fit the needs of our family.
And it's been able to do that. We have a living room area, a dining area to enjoy meals together, a full kitchen with stove, oven, running water, full-size refrigerator, and even a dishwasher. And on the other side of that, we have a workspace where the kids can do some work. And Selah loves to play the piano. And then down the hallway and to the left, we have a bathroom with a sink and a full bath and shower and a toilet too. And then around the corner from the bathroom, we conveniently set up our laundry room.
which also consists of the kids' closet.
And then back down the hallway, the kids have a triple bunk bed system set up for them to sleep in. And we have our own master bedroom.
Which we recently remodeled.
It has a great view looking out onto the pond. And it was so nice when we finally moved in here. But that first winter when we lived here was a cold one.
It was awful.
We tried to heat this thing with electrical space heaters, and they didn't do the job. And not only did they not do the job, we had a high electrical bill at the same time. So it was like I had to pay multiple ways for being cold.
And you might wonder, well, why didn't you get a wood stove? Well, at that point in time, we couldn't afford a wood stove. So we were doing what we could afford right then, and then still having to pay more.
Because we were committed to the goal of the life that we wanted to live. But that following year, thankfully, we were able to get a wood stove and have been heating in here ever since. And it's done a great job.
Yes.
And over the past few years that we lived here, we've gradually tried to make some changes to make it even more suitable for our needs, including changing the exterior of the yurt. We took off the canvas siding, put on a hard siding, and it has really changed the look of it.
Yeah. And one of my favorite upgrades is real windows that we can open and shut from the inside. Because before, we had these clear plastic Velcro on windows that if it started raining in the summer, you had to go outside and put the Velcro window on or let down the flap because it was pouring rain inside your house. And, you know, it just adds so much more light in here as well. So that is my favorite thing that we've done so far.
I still remember one thunderstorm. It was just me and the kids here. And man, it was lightning and it's like, oh no, I gotta put our windows on. And I'm putting the window on with the Velcro and it's this lightning just booming behind me. Like, ah, the kids are freaking out.
And
hurry up.
I remember a different time where it was really raining like that. But it was hailing and we were both out there putting them on, and I'm like, it's so cold, it's so cold.
Yes, so we're very thankful to having
Yes.
real windows. Now, some may think we are crazy for living in a yurt as a family of 5, but we've been able to live here comfortably. Besides, the yurt has been the vehicle for us to live the life that we want to live. A life of growing our own nutritious food, like varieties of root crops, varieties of leafy greens, tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, and more. A life that we raise livestock, including chickens for eggs and meat, ducks for eggs and meat, and also goats, turkeys, geese, and more, as well as a life full of many homesteading projects. And for many of these things, a life that has enabled us to create a home-based homestead business. But most important of all, a life in which we share life together as a family. Homesteading, growing our own food, creating a business together, and sharing life together, all because we live here in a yurt.
But here recently, we've actually thought about moving. With all the stuff that we want to do on our homestead, with what we grow and all, we want to be able to can, we want to be able to do so much more in our kitchen that just really isn't serving us well right now. And on top of that, you know, we would like for Selah to have her own space and the boys to have their own space to learn how to take care of their areas. That's another thing that we would really like. And also, the more we do on here and more creative stuff, it would be great to have a studio / office space so we can just keep all of that in one area and, you know, even create more. And to top it all off, you know, I found out a few months ago that we're gonna have another baby. So that's just another reason that we really thought about moving.
And it was so exciting. First, it was a surprise, for me at least.
Surprise for me, too.
When we found out. But it was so exciting to hear the baby's heartbeat for the very first time. You hear that? His heartbeat?
Yes.
Your brother or sister in there hanging out? So with all these things in mind, should we move? After all these years of crafting this property, making it exponentially more productive than it was before. We also live close to family members, our church community, and others, which is really, really important. And also, the cost of property is crazy right now. So, will we move?
Well, God totally answered that for us, because the day after, I'm talking the very next day after I found out that I was pregnant, I get a text from one of our friends over at Sky Ridge Yurts asking, hey, would you guys be interested in a used 30-foot yurt? And I'm like, yes, definitely. We're going to be needing some more room. I was like, give me the details. And Sky Ridge Yurts is a yurt rental company. It's kind of like they have yurt Airbnbs up in the mountains of North Carolina, and it's super pretty up there. And I was really thankful that she thought of us.
So we bought the yurt, and they delivered it in a U-Haul. And it's still kind of interesting to think that they could fit a whole nother house inside the back of a truck. But they did. So we got to work unloading it. This is a used yurt, but it looks brand new. They took really good care of it, it looks like.
Yeah. And I only think it's a few years old, so
Wow.
it's really cool.
Looks like they mark things well for us, so we know how to put things back.
I'm excited.
These doors here are super fancy compared to ours. Man, look at that. Wow. And since we still have a lot to figure out with where exactly we're going to put the yurt on the property, as well as a number of other things, floor layout, things like that, we just decided we need to store it. So under the Quonset hut, we started storing the different pieces of the yurt. And there are a few pieces of the yurt that are really heavy, like the lattice. And thankfully, Lacey's brother came just in time to help me with moving it, because it is heavy.
And there's no way that I could have done that.
There's three right here. And he also gave me a hand with moving the doors, which are also really heavy.
You're on shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take it down.
All right, that works. Okay. Yep. Okay, let's slide this way.
Another yurt. I'm so excited that we're gonna have some more room.
Now again, we still have a lot to figure out. Financially and a number of other things with getting our new yurt set up. But our plan right now is for the new yurt to be a kitchen area primarily, and to transform this yurt into just like a bedroom area. But you guys are just gonna have to wait and see the next chapter of our journey. Stay tuned.